In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet. I just watched the movie Live from Death Row. It is another made-for-TV thriller. I'm sensing a pattern, but it's okay because this movie is amazing. I'm gonna say that right now. You should definitely watch this because it's really, really good. It shows absolutely nothing and yet you feel numb after watching it because it's very brutal. Basic premise is that a news reporter who's sort of been doing these sort of over-sensationalized stories over the years after sort of doing real news and falling into this sort of sensationalism thing. I didn't say what year this movie came out, but I'll put that there or somewhere similar to that. This movie follows the reporter who goes to a prison to interview a serial killer who's on death row. And of course she gets in there, she's being filmed, everything goes horribly wrong, and long story short, this serial killer, who's Lawrence Dvorak, I believe, takes over the program and lets the other inmates out. I can't say much else besides that without spoiling anything, so I'll just say this movie is amazing. It's really, really intense. I wouldn't say it's more intense than, say, an episode of something like Sherlock, but it delves into some very, very disturbing topics, and it's super fascinating. I don't have many words for this movie except that it's really, really good. Onward to sort of spoiler stuff. So he takes over you know what? I did it again. And there are other things I can say before we get into things that are clearly spoilers. Let's go into the different inmates. So you've got Lawrence Dvorak, considers himself like the most brilliant serial killer in America. And he's got all this socio-political commentary on everything. And he has all these sort of opinions on everything and all this social commentary, and then you'll hear it and it's like, oh, that's kind of a good point. And then you look at him and he's a total sociopath. You never really learn anything about him except that he kind of hates the human race. And, well, yeah, he's a sociopath. He reminds me of, I mentioned Sherlock earlier, he reminds me of a slightly less likable Moriarty from Sherlock. There's a woman who's murdered 2 of her children, and she's definitely the most sympathetic of them. She's just like, I was desperate. My husband was going to take my kids away from me. I couldn't let that happen. I knew what I was doing. I hate everything I did, and I want to die. And you feel awful for her, because she's just super, super quiet and just... And then you've got a kid who did drugs, did crack cocaine, got the munchies, went somewhere, and then his friend killed somebody. He got blamed for it. I'm in spoilers. I'm gonna put a spoiler alert before this because I'm in spoilers now. Sorry, somebody else killed this person, he got blamed for it and put on death row. And they're definitely the most sympathetic. You've got another guy who, at first I was like, oh, this is interesting, because he's reading a Plan 9 from Outer Space comic. I don't know if that's a thing. I think that's what he was reading. But he's reading something in prison. And then we learn more about him, and he's talking about how he's, like, a war veteran who always was able to kill anybody who got in his way, and then he gets put back in a more real-life situation, and is just like, wait, the rules are different here. And he's a pretty nasty guy because, well, he tries to rape the reporter. And then you've got this other guy, an African American. You don't really hear anything from him except that this is unjust. I shouldn't be sent to the chair because this is racial discrimination. The woman who killed her kids and the guy who, when he was a kid, got convicted, both just want to die and end up killing themselves, and then Dvorak starts using it to make a point, and we've got that going on. We get little interviews live on TV because he's taken over and is using the TV to sort of show America what America is really like. It's sort of actual reality TV, pretty much. Then we get a prison guard who hates everybody in there, and we find out that that's because he was sort of taken hostage in the past and became a sex slave, which, of course, was horrific. All of the characters in this are pretty three-dimensional, except for Dvorak, which of course makes him terrifying because you never know what's going through his brain. He almost gets put through the electric chair by a guy, and then we've got someone who I think is his wife who's also working there, and she's just like, I want to see my kids, I don't have an opinion on the death penalty, and Dvorak completely goes off on her and he's just like, you don't have an opinion, you better have one soon. People like you just eat and reproduce and breathe and eat and breathe and eat and breathe, and you're a waste of life. I've spent my entire life trying to eradicate people like you. I'm repeating myself. This movie is just really intense. I don't know what else to say about it, except that we find out that the African-American man has been convicted because he murdered an entire family, an entire African-American family, because there was a scratch on his car. The other guy who's talking about being a veteran is more of a petty thief, as it's put, because we've got this whole finale where the woman who's running the TV station takes back over and sort of calls everybody out on everything. We know how horrible they are, but she sort of rallies them to her side and straps Dvorak in the electric chair. He's just like, all right, you can kill me now. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to be famous. And everybody's just like, no, we want you to suffer and just stay here. And then he just starts screaming all these obscenities at everybody. He calls the African guy the N-word. Then the woman who he threatened, who he did some pretty cruel stuff to, can't take it anymore and pulls the switch and he dies. I've left a fair amount out. There's action in there, but it's a lot more talking. Again, they don't show much, but you can picture everything, and it's a very vivid picture and a very intense picture. I highly recommend this movie. You should absolutely watch it. I looked at the credits for this and it says it was like a Disney ABC production, which, wow, I didn't know they would be willing to be involved with this, but hey, Disney, money, I guess. I don't really know. Dvorak would hate me because I don't really have an opinion on these things. That is my review of Live from Death Row. Watch it. It's, along with Summer of Fear, hands down the best thing in that box that I've seen thus far. Not the whole box set, but that disc. Before I go, I would like to shout out my friend Parker, who is the drummer in my band Scream Into This. We don't have any material out. We are pretty much a cover band. I have one video of them up on my channel at this moment. But he is doing a podcast in the future, I believe, called the Dark Side Podcast, where he is going to try to have people on to talk about paranormal experiences that they have had. So if you have something you want to share, I will link his Twitter account somewhere, and you could possibly be on his podcast. So if you have any interest in that, I will have his Twitter handle on here somewhere. That's a thing. Live from Death Row is also a thing, and it's a thing you should watch. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.